Close your eyes for just a second. Picture the Maldives. What pops into your head? If you're like most people, you're probably picturing a sun-bleached postcard, right? You know, the overwater bungalows, those crystal-clear aquamarine lagoons, maybe couples holding hands walking down pristine white sand beaches. Well, today we are going to completely flip that script. We're going way beyond the luxury resorts to unpack a deeply complex 3,000-year-old nation that is actively navigating some massive historical, political, and environmental transformations.
Okay, let's dive into this, because is the Maldives more than just a honeymoon spot? Absolutely. That whole luxury playground illusion, it's really just a tiny fraction of the reality. The true Maldives is this fascinating society sitting right at the crossroads of ancient trade routes. It's an Islamic republic that has weathered colonialism, modern political turbulence, and now it literally stands on the absolute front lines of the global climate crisis.
So, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look beyond the tourist paradise. Second, its history as a crossroads of ancient empires. Third, the path to democracy. Fourth, a rapidly shifting cultural landscape. And finally, facing the climate crisis.
All right, Section 1. Beyond the tourist paradise, the geographic reality.
To really wrap your head around the Maldives, you have to understand the absolutely incredible canvas it's painted on. 1,192. That is the staggering number of coral islands that make up the country, grouped into 26 atolls. And here is the truly wild part. These islands are scattered across a massive 90,000 square kilometers of the Indian Ocean. It's a vast aquatic nation where the ocean isn't a barrier at all. Historically, it's actually been the main highway for trade, commerce, and connection.
But check out this sharp contrast. Out of those thousands of islands, only 192 are actually inhabited by local communities. That's it. The rest are either totally untouched or they belong to the 90 or so islands that are strictly carved out for tourism development. And for a long time, this created a really intense geographic divide between where the locals actually live and where the tourists play.
See, for decades, the Maldives ran on a pretty strict policy of isolation when it came to tourism. Resort tourism was the main economic engine. We're talking billions of dollars, but it was kept completely isolated on those separate islands. Locals and tourists practically never mixed. But that is really starting to change. The introduction of guest house tourism has been a total game changer. It's allowed local entrepreneurs to build budget-friendly accommodations right on inhabited islands. This effectively broke that long-standing isolation, it diversified the economy away from just high-end resorts, and honestly, it finally allows visitors to experience authentic Maldivian culture.
Moving right along to Section 2, Crossroads of Ancient Empires, a History of Survival.
Now that we've got the lay of the land, or I guess the sea, let's shift gears and look at the deep historical roots here. The Maldives didn't just magically appear when the first resort opened up in 1972. It has a deeply gripping history of survival. We can look at 4 massive historical pivots. The islands were settled millennia ago and practiced Buddhism for over 1,000 years. But in 1153, the last Buddhist king was overthrown and the population converted to Islam, heavily influenced by Arab traders. Fast forward to 1558, and the Portuguese invade the capital, Malé, but locals fiercely repelled them, reviving their own traditions to fight back. By 1887, facing pressure from the Dutch and other Europeans, the Sultan signed a treaty, making the Maldives a British protectorate, basically to secure British naval interests. And finally, in 1965, the British withdrew, giving birth to the modern independent state. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how all that unique cultural blending actually birthed a completely distinct written script called Thana. Because the Maldives sat right on those strategic Indian Ocean spice routes, they absorbed influences from India, the Arab world, Africa, and Europe. The Thana script became this ultimate tool for local expression. It fueled a massive treasure trove of indigenous literature, poetry, and historical narratives that are still studied today.
Which brings us to Section 3, the path to democracy, a turbulent transition. Building off that newly independent state, let's objectively look at the political landscape. We are just going to examine the raw historical data here to trace how the Maldives evolved into a modern democracy. After independence, the country settled into a 30-year autocratic rule under President Mamoun Abdul Gayoom. Now, the economy definitely boomed during this time thanks to tourism, but political dissent was heavily suppressed. That suppression finally cracked in 2003, when widespread civil rights protests erupted, demanding economic and political reform. The pressure was so immense it forced the country's very first competitive, free and fair elections in 2008, bringing Mohamed Nasheed to power. But the transition has been deeply turbulent. According to our sources, the years since have seen profound fragmentation. It includes a coup in 2015 and subsequent states of emergency. It just really shows that building a democracy is an ongoing, difficult struggle here. But if you want to know where the future of this democracy is heading, you really have to look at the youth. A highly digitally connected generation of young Maldivians is fundamentally reshaping the conversation. Armed with smartphones and internet access, they are actively pushing back against corruption. They've actually created physical public memory spaces for those 2003 protests to honor that fight for justice. And online, they're using highly creative, totally irreverent social media memes to deliver real-time political commentary. They are a loud, powerful force that simply refuses to be silenced by traditional authorities.
Let's head into Section 4, a shifting cultural landscape. Tradition meets modernity.
That digital revolution naturally leads us to the shifting social fabric of the islands. Economic progress and evolving religious interpretations are really impacting daily life. Our source materials outline a stark and fascinating cultural shift specifically regarding the role of women. Historically, the Maldives had an incredibly strong matrilocal tradition where women held significant power, queens ruled the nation, women kept their own property, and they enjoyed a high status even in divorce. However, the text points out that the growing influence of modern religious conservatism has altered that landscape. Today, the data reports a loss of inheritance equality compared to the past, and certain societal interpretations have started placing restrictions on higher education and social mobility for women. It's a profound example of how historical traditions and modern ideological shifts are constantly pulling at the cultural fabric.
And this brilliantly illustrates another monumental shift, this time in public health. Get this. In the early 1970s, life expectancy in the Maldives was just 43 years. By 2018, it had skyrocketed to 77 years. Infant mortality plummeted alongside it. We are looking at an absolutely massive leap in the standard of living over just a few decades. This is directly tied to the economic boom and targeted government investments in citizen welfare.
One of the absolute crown jewels of that welfare investment is called Asanda. Established in 2011, this is the Maldives' universally accessible social health insurance scheme, and it is incredibly comprehensive. It's not just paying for a quick doctor's visit. Because these islands are so dispersed, the national budget actually finances emergency transport between the islands, and it even covers travel for life-saving procedures outside the country if the treatment isn't available locally. It is a seriously remarkable commitment to modern social care.
Finally, we reach Section 5. Facing the climate crisis, the existential threat. As we get into this, we need to slow down for a second. All of these incredible strides in health, democracy, and culture are happening under a looming, undeniable shadow. We have to zoom out to the global environmental reality facing this archipelago. The stark physical truth is that the Maldives is the world's lowest-lying nation. Out of that massive 90,000 square kilometer footprint we talked about earlier, there is only 298 square kilometers of actual land, and the vast majority of those islands rise less than 2 meters above sea level. So the Maldives isn't just experiencing climate change, they are the global bellwether for it.
For Maldivians, this isn't some theoretical projection for the year 2100. It is an immediate, day-to-day survival crisis. Locals report that their most urgent concerns right now are severe coastline erosion literally eating away their homes and massive piles of washed-up waste. Beneath the surface, rising sea temperatures are aggressively bleaching the coral reefs, which, remember, form the very physical foundation of these islands. Add to that the depletion and overuse of precious freshwater groundwater, and you are looking at an ecosystem under incredible immediate strain.
But despite these massive existential threats, the spirit of the Maldivian people is defined by resilience. As our source material beautifully puts it, the Maldives increasingly sees the need to acknowledge its vulnerabilities as an opportunity and strength in a world that must learn to change. They aren't just sitting around waiting for the water to rise, they are actively fighting back with extensive marine spatial planning initiatives, protecting hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of territorial seas, and pushing really aggressive community-based conservation programs.
So, what does this all mean? It leaves us with one haunting, provocative question. Can the world's lowest-lying nation survive the rising tides of the 21st century? The Maldives is a place of absolute extreme duality, breathtaking beauty resting on an incredibly fragile foundation. It's a nation that has survived ancient invasions, fought tooth and nail for its democracy, and is now fighting for its very existence on the global stage. I really hope this explainer has given you a richer, deeper understanding of the true Maldives, way beyond that postcard image. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today, and keep questioning what you see.